Nothing really like that. Nothing about something like that. Third element that I found. I like that too. All right. Oh, that's beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, my good man. All right, let's go and finish this up. So I'm pretty sure I'm here on Thursday, but I will not be here on Friday. For sure, I won't be here on Friday. So I'm kind of changing things around.
Still no test this week, right?
So it will not be a test this week.
If I,
It is very much that. The name is so.
I'm not waiting.
It is. And that's one thing. What's yeah, it's. There's a couple other movies like that, but yeah, that's definitely happening. But also, you know,
Monday?
with this, it's not. It's like a. Happy fun. Yeah. Don't taunt. Happy fun. All right, so let me tell you real quick what we're gonna do. So, oh, let me give you the list. Would you like a review list for the test?
Yes, please.
You want the review list? So what I did is I just typed in secret code.
I'm not gonna say. No.
There we go. All right. As I hand this out. So then on Friday, what we're gonna do is this. You're gonna watch a very good video on the triangle shortwave fire. It is excellent. And then it's about 25 minutes long. However long it takes for the stuff to get things set up and all that kind of stuff. And then I'm gonna give you a reading on the jungle. There'll be some questions. And so I'll give you the rest of the period to work on that. That's for the text. This is the actual text. Text. I know. And I use lots of half sheets of paper to save paper. We tried it one year just doing them all online.
When?
And everyone.
Sorry.
Yeah. I've got everyone. 9:20 to 9:33 will be due on Thursday, but I don't think I'm gonna have a quiz on that one. It's not enough to give a quiz. Tuesday or Wednesday. We got President's Day. That's I forgot about President. You notice it at, we need another one. The format, time. I like that. It's the best font. We can read it. It's actually the by far the easiest one to read. I'm here for it. All right. So did we get to this? Oh, except for one thing, you have to draw the boom bust cycle, the basics of it. And I'll figure how I want to set this up, but I'm still, you know, my plan is to type the short IDs. That's my plan. Gotta start typing. How many short is 40 or 4? I think. There's 4. I'm looking at 4. And then drawing the boom bust cycle.
Wait, so the ones with the.
Those are gonna be choices for short IDs, probably. I'll narrow it down.
How many columns?
I'll narrow it down. But those are the ones when I was going through making the list, I thought this would be a good one, this would be a good one.
It's one from each column.
Yeah, I'll do something like that. There might be 1 or 2, I'll say you have to answer one of these 2, you know, something like that, but I'll give you choices. All right, did we get to this?
We got the 18th of forgottenness.
Oh, so we got the end. So very good. Now let me take to a little background. What was the law? What was the law that Pastor and Cleveland's administration they thought would regulate railroad rates, but didn't? Say it again. You said it. Yeah, ICT. Very good. And it was quickly filled with what type of people? Yeah, railroad guys. And that's called regulatory capture. And what was the law that thought would regulate monopolies and begin to break them up, but actually did nothing? Yeah, the Sherman antitrust. That's actually, for the first 20 years of that law, it was actually used more often to break up labor unions than monopolies. What was the law that would purchase silver, thinking it would bring inflation? Yeah. And what was the going to lower the tariff and didn't lower the tariff? The McKinley tariff. And so that is going to lead to basically, you can imagine farmers, workers thinking the parties are both rigged against us. They're both rigged. And directly to the People's Party, the populists, we got anti-social Darwinism. The problem they had was there really was this urban-rural divide. And so they were intensely anti-urban and also fearful of immigration of the other. There's these people from other countries, Southern and Eastern Europe or Eastern Asia, they just seem different and scary. This urban rural bias is so big. Anti-intellectual, the thought was these people with their diplomas and lawyers and certificates were cheating them and thinking they were dumb. These hicks and yokels were used all the time in the 1890s to refer to people from the country. And they felt that urban people looked down on them. And there was an element of that without a doubt. That's what it means. But also the mythology, the myth that Jews were the bankers in medieval Europe led to this real explosion of anti-Semitic attitude in the United States because nobody likes the person you owe money to, combined with don't forget. This was the most racist time in history. There was a significant number of people coming from from Central and Eastern Europe. And that's where the largest population of Jews in the world was. Russia at that time had the largest population of Jews in the world. And many of them, because there's no Poland yet at that time, had immigrated to the United States. By 1910, the town with the highest percentage of Jews in the world is going to be New York City. That's how many immigrants came over, including my niece and nephew's grandparents. They came from Lithuania. And they all came at this time, they're Jewish, and all their family is gone. They didn't leave. World War II. So they were most certainly murdered. Yeah. So back to this. This is a mythology about the Jewish banker. And so they just and this will fit in with this. This intensely racist time. And this was this party. Remember the Knights of Labor? So it's like this hodgepodge of different groups. Patchwork and hot air balloons were the rage. The Greenback and Silver Party wanted inflation. Socialists, the Grange, another farmers group we didn't talk about in class called the Farmers Alliance. So all these little groups kind of form together, but it's going to be for the people. But they are going to be divided. There's going to be this urban-rural divide. And they met. Where else would you meet? Omaha, Nebraska. I didn't put down the year, put down 1892. And they met there for their convention. (1892). And as we all know, does anybody know the word for being very cultured, have a cross section of different groups and cultures and like art, music? Anybody know what that term is? Have you ever heard the term cosmopolitan? I think somebody did say it. Did you say it? Cosmopolitan. As we all know, probably the most cosmopolitan town in the United States, a cross section of cultures and groups and identities, just art, music, literature. The most cosmopolitan town in the United States is, of course, Omaha, Nebraska, right? Right? Omaha. It's even more cosmopolitan than Helena. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they got so many McDonald's. Who's been to Omaha? Only 3 of us have been to Omaha. You left? I bet it was hard to leave. I bet it was really hard to leave. We should take a field trip to Omaha. You guys get on the yellow school bus, go, I'll meet you there. I'll let you just enjoy it. I've been to Omaha many times. But anyways, these were their goals. These were their goals. And I have to mention what's in here, because this is going to become a different path than laissez-faire, or for that matter, socialism. And so This is going to be really crucial to understand the political structure that's coming up. Give me 1 second. So what they wanted was inflation, and soon. Give me 1 second. Oh boy!
Oh.
How did they get the wing games? All right, here we go. Inflation. And they wanted more money in circulation. It's more money out there, with the idea being that prices would begin to go up, they can pay back their debts. And soon the code, the slogan for inflation, whatever the policy might be, was just simply free silver. Just free silver meant inflation. Now, most of them were just, the big thing's anti-gold standard. So they actually wanted greenbacks, AKA the currency we have today, with the idea being that the value of the currency is based upon the good faith of the United States government, the fact that it collects taxes and pays its bills, and can be trustworthy and is stable. That is what backs the US currency. And that's what they wanted. But if they couldn't have that, at least have the US government buy silver and coin it. Buy silver and coin it, be silver. That's what that meant. So that puts more money in circulation. And yeah, the United States pays its debt. We're coming to interesting times, so we'll see what happens to the value of US currency now. Next, they're antitrust. They want to break up monopolies. They wanted a stronger Sherman Antitrust Act. I just wrote monopolies, just to remind you of that. And they really looked at, there should be strict controls on markets that affect now everybody's lives. And they looked at railroads, telephone communication, but they really caught the idea of what a big deal electricity is going to be. Electricity was just starting out. Remember, they're just having that AC/DC argument, and electricity. And they even thought maybe the government should take total control of these industries, because so many people rely upon them. If it's for profit, they can squeeze people out if they don't have enough money. And electricity was already clearly happening. Private companies will only bring electricity to areas where they know they can make money. So that means most rural areas would never have had electricity if not for the intervention of the US government. That happened during the New Deal. So I'm setting up what's coming in a lot of ways. This is opening the door. People started talking about it. Next, direct election of senators. Senators were chosen by state assemblies, and this was seen as the millionaires club. They just would pick whoever, the rich of the rich. Montana was by far one of the most corrupt states. And think about it, we were just a new state in 1892, and we're already one of the most corrupt states. Pretty cool, huh? I'll tell you about the bribery down the road. It was shocking, the bribery in Montana for senator. Now, it wouldn't be till 1913, but it would happen, where the people would vote for the senators. Next, a progressive income tax. With a progressive income tax, replacing tariffs. Remember, tariffs is another tax on people in the United States, which is very regressive. It would increase R&D's research and development. People don't want to pay taxes, so they would pump money back into their own company. And also, progressive income taxes raise wages. I will explain more how this happens when we get to the New Deal. So I'm just floating this out here. Now, the Supreme Court had ruled 10 years earlier that an income tax was unconstitutional, which is a very curious reading of the Constitution, because the Constitution says Congress can pass laws, can pass direct taxation. But it doesn't say the word income. But of course the Constitution doesn't say income tax. The Constitution was written for free capitalism, free wage system. So it's written for a completely different world than our world or the world of 1892. It's going to require a constitutional amendment. And let me add one thing. A progressive income tax means this. It's going to tax incomes that people make, and the higher your income, the greater percentage of the tax. Has everyone got that? That's progressive. Most taxes, like tariffs or sales taxes, are regressive. The lower your income, your tax rate goes up significantly. And the idea of this was, since profit in capitalism goes to the top, which is the great incentive for capitalism, this is a way to address that. Way to address it. So that's a progressive income tax. The United States is fairly progressive income tax right now. And that's part of the reason why President Trump was talking about replacing with tariffs. Because he was talking about getting rid of income taxes and replacing with tariffs. And we got a new tariff. 25% on iron, on steel and iron. What century am I in? Steel and aluminum. Did everyone catch that? And so what's Canada announced they're going to do? They're going to raise tariffs. They'll raise tariffs. China's going to raise tariffs. It's going to be a big trade war. I don't know if he'll stick with it. The stock market appears to be acting like he's going to back down. He did it in 2018 and he backed down. Especially when 75,000 workers who lost their job because they worked with steel and prices. That was in 2018. Do you remember those heady days? How old were you guys? 10? Kind of weird, isn't it? He also wanted an estate tax. An estate tax is a large tax on the very big estates. The idea being to at least curtail inherited wealth. And that also kind of goes back to the US. To the US Constitution in the beginning. The idea being you make it on your own merit. Now, when I mean large estates, I mean the very large, like the top 2 or 3% of estates. Most estates would not be taxed. We have an estate tax today. Anybody know what it is? All incomes above 13.5, all estates above $13.5 million are taxed. Any inheritance below $13.5 million is not taxed. So that's about what, 0.6% of the states. Something like that, 0.4%. So most estates aren't covered, aren't taxed. It's probably not enough, but that's another show. Next. They're very pro-union. Now, the problem was, since they had this also anti-urban bias, industrial workers never trusted them. And so they said they wanted unions because unions raise wages. Unions raise wages. You raise wages, that's more demand. Hey, you buy more food for help farmers. Next, one of the big issues that was happening, that was unprecedented, so it's new to the 19th century, retirement. That whole idea did not exist before the Industrial Revolution. It just didn't exist. It would have made no sense. But now what do you do if you can no longer work, but you're still alive? And remember, the new economic system with the wage system, almost everybody's got to go to someplace else who has the capital. Once you no longer work, what do you do? And so they wanted an old age pension. This is going to be called in the United States Social Security, with the idea being some kind of pension that all workers will pay into and then get a small pension to help them survive after they're done. So it's a wage after they are done working. Now, Germany had just done this, so the US is copying. This would not happen in the United States. Companies hate this. It actually raises wages. If you're close to retirement, you have a pension, you can kind of like, I'm going to demand higher wages because I have this pension waiting for me. If you know when you retire, you're going to be broke and destitute and living in an old age home, which were hellholes back then, you'll take lower wages. It's just how economics work. When did the United States get Social Security? You might not know. That is an old age pension. You might not know this now because you're probably thinking retirement is very far away. I got news for you. As you get older, time flies. Be fast. Especially vacations. Yeah. Everyone is asking me when we're retired, they're trying to run me out. I've noticed that people want me gone. That's a curse. When is it? When? That's what's like pretty cool. You get tired of seeing the same thing. But When did the United States get social security? 1935 during the news. There's Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. Hey, now it's time. This is stuff. Know where it came from. Trust me, your grandparents and your parents. They start getting in their 50s. They know. They know. So, Social Security, old age pension. So something to do about this, because what happened is either people went to old age homes or they had to live with their kids. And they didn't want to be burdened on their kids. Their kids have the same issue with the wage system that they have. They don't want to be burdens on you. So, next, they push for women's rights and civil rights, even though this clearly was not for everybody. Women's and civil rights. So the big thing is they wanted regulated capitalism. They wanted regulated capitalism, and this is the beginning of liberal economics. So we've had conservative economics. We have the basics, laissez-faire, pump money to the wealthy, high tariffs, gold standard, no income tax, no regulation of monopolies. This, much different. This is the beginnings of liberal economics. And what you see right here then will be used later on by the progressive movement like Teddy Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, but then most famously with the New Deal of Franklin Roosevelt and the kind of democratic liberalism that would run this country from 32 to 1980. Now we have been conservative since 1981. There's a bird of crows. They know something. The crows are coming, people.
That's a bird.
The birds.
Not the bird.
The birds, they're coming. So here is what they're saying. We have our two established parties, the Republicans and Democrats, more of the same. Basically conservative economics, and we're giving you a third way, the People's Party. Even though I find this funny. Republican Party, builders of corporate wealth. The Democratic Party, builders of saloons and jails. Remember the 13th Amendment? Arresting people, especially the quota system, remember that? That's what it's talking about there. And like the People's Party, the builders of churches and schools. Okay, that's really kind of amusing. It's not really telling what they really wanted, but I find it fun. So the election, jumping right here, the election of 1892, a third party is jumped in. The closest we got to this date, 1854, the midterm election where you have basically, or even 1856, the dying Whigs, but now the new Republican, and remember the know-nothing anti-immigrant party. So Benjamin Harrison, the sitting president, more laissez-faire. Grover Cleveland promises he will do something about monopolies, but he has already proven to be very laissez-faire and intensely social Darwinistic. Uncle Grover was very social Darwinistic. And so he didn't really mean it. Most people believed, after seeing what happened to the ICC, that Grover Cleveland will be more of the same. So you have something where there's really not a lot of choice, except for the simple fact, maybe one might be slightly better, depending on your point of view. But I'm Team Democrat or I'm Team Republican. And then a third party, James Weaver of Iowa, the populist, a legitimate third party choice. But here's a cartoon from 1860. I'm sorry, 1892. 60. And there's another one, the snake. And notice it says Monopoly and it's coiled around the Capitol. Pretty clever one. I like this cartoon a lot. And it's attacking, this was a symbol the United States used a lot. We have both symbols used at this time. Lady Columbia and Uncle Sam. You see this strange little kid that's wearing a top coat and carrying a pin? That represented the new year, the future. And it's basically saying if we don't do something about this now, America will be succumbed by monopolies. So either an oligarchy or revolution. It's coming, people. That's what they're saying there. And the election turned out to be amazing. Cleveland would win. The first president, now we've had two to win non-consecutive terms. Totally different kind of race, totally different reasons, but the first of two. Look how many votes the populace got. And remember, a third-party candidate, if you vote for a third-party candidate, you're probably taking away from one of the other two. One of the other two, it's winner take all. Did really well in the West, almost won Montana. A few states split because of this, and populists kind of went both ways, and that allowed Cleveland to retake some of these states here, because the populists voted, people voted, or Republicans voted for the populists. What an election, huh? The 3 electors, yeah. So the state picked 3 electors, and the state was actually won by the Republicans, just barely won by the Republicans. The 3 electors they picked, though, were supposed to be 3 Republicans, and they split their vote. So one was a Muslim, and one was a populist. North Dakota will soon be taken over by the populists. And Montana, the populists are going to have great power. Montana, because it was so corrupt, the populists would try to reform. Montana's a vastly different state, even today, than what it was even 20 years ago. So, almost immediately after Cleveland was elected president and got married, remember he was an eligible bachelor. Mama was my pa. And the Panic of 1893 hit. And this panic was much worse than 1873. No one had ever seen anything this bad before. The boom bust cycle just kept getting worse and worse. The big one was, remember, oversupply, got railroads again. They pushed railroad production, companies borrowed money, and soon they began to lose money. But also, there was a massive speculative bubble, not just in gold, but these new kinds of bonds called, today we would call them financial instruments. And they were bonds that would be created by investment bankers and others, where they would basically take various assets like building and other debt, and they would make this bond that they would sell, and nobody knew what they were buying. They were just instruments to speculate and try to get rich. And that's where you get this from Flim Flam, this from Puck Magazine, the Flim Flam Finance, hard to say. Yeah, that's 3 times fast. And somebody else can do it. I can't. But it's showing this as like this web sucking in investors, the public. And they created all these, they called them trusts, but there were these bonds that people could buy and speculate on. And nobody really knew what they were buying. That's 1893. A very similar thing would happen with something called investment trust in 1929. And something very similar would happen in 2007, 2008. Things called credit default swaps and derivatives. If you don't know what they are, I'm envious. I kind of wish I didn't know. They're awful. And it's happening now. People are speculating in things that have no real financial backing. Please avoid cryptocurrency. With my advice, please avoid it. It's only a tool of speculation and or organized crime. But similar things happen time after time. So I was asked what it's like to be immortal. It's like watching the same thing happen time after time. And yes, that made me feel very old. And I already did. So moving on. At the same time, Cleveland came in saying, I'm going to get rid of the Sherman Silver Purchasing Act. It was just piling silver up. It makes sense if you're not going to make coins out of them. The problem is, once they passed the Sherman Silver Purchasing Act, repealed it, $4 million that were being pumped into the economy every month stopped. Almost immediately, $4 million. Has everyone got that? If you take out $4 million out of the economy every month, that's $4 million less. I'm supposed to say this. Write down demand. $4 million less demand. $4 million less demand. I must have thought about it. I thought about typing in demand. So you already have oversupply. The bubble was just about ready to burst, and all of a sudden you suck $4 million out. So what would that be today? You know, it's hard to really put in a term, but really to get an exact number, but taking a couple $1 billion out of the economy, just over. You can imagine what it did to Butte or mining communities all over Montana. This just hammered Montana. And this would be, in many ways then, this would be the trigger of a worldwide depression. that would last up until 1898, 1899. And that's really interesting when people talk about the 1890s and say what a great time it was. It was one of the worst economic times in American and world history. It was an absolute catastrophe. And when the world would not get out of it to the end of the decade, and arguably, it would be low wages well into World War I. So, one more thing, a trade war was initiated. When the McKinley tariff was signed, all our trading partners raised their tariff too. And all of a sudden, worldwide trade war. So also we're trying to sell goods overseas, no one's buying them. We're going to be witnessing a trade war here pretty soon. And so we'll see the same thing happening. US raised tariffs, our trading partners raised tariffs, and we're mad. Especially if you violated previous agreements. Happen all over the world. Same thing's going to happen in 1930. Same thing's going to happen right now. We'll see. And also, almost immediately, you had 20 to 25% unemployment overnight. Thousands of businesses shut their doors, and people started saying, is there going to be a revolution? And people began to sit on their fortunes. The wealthy became even more entrenched and fearful and wanting to gain more power to hoard and continue to hold their wealth. This was a nasty one. The next year, it looked like the revolution was going to hit. This is one of the more popular pictures of the panic. This is 1893. And think about if you had a bond or a stock, and you thought this piece of paper, that back then you had to get a stock certificate or a bond certificate, and it was worth this much money, and also you found out it was worthless. That's the panic. And you'll notice it has things like rotten railroad, rotten telegraph. These are all the stocks. And these, remember bank panics? And then for some reason, a duck. But I found the duck comforting. In a panic, ducks. I think it's a green-winged teal. Who agrees with me? Don't hit people. You okay?
You just see how
What? Don't do that. Your eye rolled in the back of your head?
No, I'm just.
Oh, okay. So, this was now the classic example of the boom bust cycle. Now, I want to find a picture of the boom bust cycle. I just typed in boom bust cycle. I was actually looking for something else. And this thing came up from Econ EdLink to show students of the boom bust cycle. And I just thought this was one of the more ridiculous things I've ever seen. Does this tell you anything? We have vague lines, periods of time, then peak, contraction, trough, peak. I wonder if anybody's using this in class. No. Yeah, what? We don't care. I just thought this was so funny. I put it out there. There's a lot of, this might shock you. There's actually a lot of junk on the internet. Did you know that? So, also, right after the panic, the Central Park Zoo, basically what happened is one of the walls came down and all the animals escaped. And so there are all these wild animals roaming around Manhattan. And supposedly a tiger attacked somebody and a guy punched him in the nose and fended off the tiger. Yeah, I know. Tigers, you can't do that. The tiger's got a good left jab. You try to come in and they'll get you. Lions, you can do that too. Okay, that would have been kind of cool to see rhinos and hippos running down the street. Hippos are friendly. Don't do that. Yeah, and Alvin escaped from the circus. Yeah. Well, so I didn't put the date down. Just put down 1894. An event that happened called Coxey's Army. And Coxey's Army, Jacob Coxey was in Ohio, and he was looking at 1894, and he saw a mass of unemployed people, and he got an idea. What if all of us march on Washington, D.C., remember the First Amendment, freedom to assemble, and demand Congress to act? And his prescription, march to D.C. to get jobs, to create government jobs. If the government, which doesn't have the same debt issues, can create, there's a lot of work to be done. the government could do things like building roads and canals. Your cities were a mess. This would put money in people's hand and demand would go up. In the 20th century, we would call this public works. Today, we would say, like, have you heard the term infrastructure? Just no one ever used that until about 25 years ago. But create jobs. Use taxpayer money. The government doesn't have the same constraints. Stimulate demand. Remember the boom bust cycle. Demand starts, and that will eventually create supply and get the engine of recovery going. And so all these people start to form all over to march on Washington, D.C. I should tell you, that shows how people, desperate people. You don't just all of a sudden say, yeah, I'm going to march to Washington, D.C. Walk to Washington, D.C. or hope you catch a train. And stay until you get a job. People are desperate and scared. But they call themselves the American or the Provisional Army. And they marched on Washington, D.C. A bunch of them came from Montana. A bunch of miners. They all showed up in Missoula, for example, kind of the center of this kind of mining region around that area. They showed up in Missoula and said, we're going to Washington, D.C. and we're not leaving till you help. So Missoula, then about 14,000, 15,000 people. They were going through the Depression too. They got enough money together to ship those miners who want to march in Coxey's army. They got them to Butte. Did all around to Butte, they did the same thing. They got to Billings, and that's how they got all the way to Washington, D.C. They just went through and said, we're not leaving until you get us to Washington. But when they got there, this is them on the floor or on the steps of the United States Capitol. And it looked like the House might actually pass a law like this. Cleveland. How did Cleveland feel about Coxey's army? Cleveland thought was totally opposed. If you give people who are unemployed a job, just give them money, they'll become lazy. They'll quit working. They'll drink it away. What philosophy did Cleveland believe in? 100% social darkness. He was opposed, and they pushed through a law because Washington, D.C. is a federal territory to arrest him. I forgot an S. They made walking on the grass illegal and arrested Coxey because his men were going to camp in front of the Capitol, and he would be held for his beliefs. He would be a political prisoner. Thousands marched on Washington, D.C., and that ended it. They realized that the powers to be were not going to vote them jobs, and they kind of drifted away. But think about this for a second. If you have an army of people, they literally call themselves an army, and they march on Washington, D.C., and their commander was calling himself a provisional general. What does that sound like? Doesn't that sound like revolution? And then the next year, last thing you have to write down for today, the next thing. Oh, almost forgot. Here's the People's Party. He's behind bars. Here, this is attacking him. Here, it's talking about all the trust and rich going to Congress and getting their tariffs and the gold standard and money for the railroads. And yet they don't do it for Coxey. Yet the wealthy get massive breaks. That's 1893. Last thing you have to get down, the Pullman strike. The Pullman strike also happened in 1894. And this was even bigger. Pullman had a company town, paid a company script. They called it a model town. But what's going to happen to profits during a bust? You think the drop. I think you probably see where this is going to go. We'll finish this tomorrow. Thank you, my good man. So watch a little bit more satire. Yeah, I got a little bit more about how to spend.
Oh,
Oh,
I wasn't one of the. It sounds familiar, but it's like early.
good one.
Yeah.
you gonna drink that? No. I don't know why I would have.
Yeah. That's pretty good. I like that.
Can I make up the quiz from last Thursday?
Oh, yeah.
The beginning of class. Okay.
Goodbye, everybody. Enjoy the cold. Savor it. How much at the temperature right now? I'm guessing 11 below. It's -4. Not too bad. It's a banana belt, people. The howler monkeys are coming back. The howler monkeys are coming back. Don't be.
Can't be here in 2 days.
Okay. Very German. -4. I mean, we can have class outside. -20. It's -4 outside. T-shirt weather. It's ready. Nah, make the play.
Dude, I'm sorry, wait.
Maybe that was diabolical.
You started doing bad. Just doing that. And then.
Oh my god, it's like.
Missing something, 20 group pull-ups, 20 steps. Usually the frustration.
Yes.
20 calories on the bike. On the bike, the bike feels here, we're going to. And 20 calories not counting goes to yeah, 20 calories. It tastes like. You get the
Yeah, I just confused me when you came in.
Yeah.
Somewhere like.
Yeah, another like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was a lot. Well played. Show.
Yeah, sorry about this. I've been around.
I see where it is closer to my house. Hey, everybody, ask me to favor number 110. I'm just checking the temperature.
Archer, you're supposed to be like a high.
Woo, woo. So it's between. The closest thermometer here that's recorded is -7.
That's fine.
How much? That sounds about right. It's -24 miles. It's a little bit different.
By car, which is.
All means. Sheet of paper, 1 to 10. 1 to 10, I want this, write it uphill, make it uphill.
Ryan.
I already got another.
Oh, I was on.
Yeah, you could see more.
Chop chop, people, we got a test. Okay. 10. Let's go to 100 by 10. And Roman numerals. Do Roman numerals, go 100 by 10. Don't follow his direction.
I should say that's worse.
Huh?
Oh, yeah.
It does work. Let's do it. No questions? I don't have any answer. X. B is 5.
Thank
What's 100? What's 100?
you. Yeah.
B. C no.
Straight out. Straight out.
When I took a history of math class in college, we had to do multiplication, addition, subtraction, division.
I'm like teaching them at each school, anytime you see. I didn't know that. Like, we should be. So. One of those traits.
2. Here.
I really. Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm filming this. This is good. This will be fun to watch on YouTube. People be handing out tests.
Can you film the answers?
Huh? What's that?
Film the answers.
Let's get the wrong answer, see if anyone notices.